my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, and we are jumping out to talk NBA free agency. And Jay, why don't you explain exactly how we're going to go about this process of trying to figure out all the goofy things that have gone on and the things that have made sense, the
It's
things that
silly
haven't
season,
made
Mike.
sense. There's a
Silly
ton of
season
things
has
to talk about.
officially upon us. Silly season
It
has been
is.
so. Um, Mike and I were trying to come up with the best way, and originally, traditionally we do like a timeline situation, and it just there's too much to there's too much to try to digest that has happened in the 2 days since free agency opened. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through every reported deal, trade, signing, because nothing is official until July 6th. That's correct, right? Like July 6th is the date, which I think is another idiotic thing. Like, why are we setting the free agency starting now and we wait till July 6th? I think we say this every single year. I don't know. There's a reason for it. I don't know what the reason is, just to
Reason
make it
probably is they
confusing.
have to certify and go through all the contracts and make sure that everything is whatever the
Above
legality and
board.
the legalese is in place. That's what I'm
So
guessing.
so we're going to go through every team that as of now we are recording this on Tuesday at 11 p.m. So if something happens Tuesday at 2:30 and we don't mention it, that's why, because we're recording this at 11 p.m. And we're just going to go through each team, and then Mike and I are going to just basically say, do we think this team has gotten better? Do we think this team has gotten worse, or are they about the same as they were? Okay. Some of these will be a little bit quicker, but we're gonna try to go through all 30 NBA teams. So we're not gonna belabor the point. Okay, we're gonna start with the Atlanta Hawk. We're going alphabetically for the sake of ease, and also because the thing the NBA.com article we're using is in alphabetical order. The Atlanta Hawks have added Nikhil Alexander Walker, Luke Kennard, and Kristaps Porzingis. They've lost Clint Capella to the Rockets, Karis LeVert to the Pistons, Larry Nance Jr. to the Cavs, and George Niang and Terrence Mann got traded away. Do we think that the Hawks have gotten better? Do we think the Hawks have stayed the same? Do we think the Hawks have gotten worse? My personal opinion, Mike, is I think they're probably about the same. Kristaps Porzingis is better than any of those other players. He's 100% if he's healthy. Luke Kennard is a great 3-point shooter. Nikhil Alexander Walker is a pretty solid player, but I think maybe they are a little bit better, but I think they're lost a little bit of depth. My opinion. Um, I That's where I'm at with the Hawks as of this
All
moment.
right, healthy, they're better. I don't think there's any doubt. I think we could give the caveat with any team, right? We talk about this when we do our previews, and one of the things we always say, well, if they can stay healthy, well, I think in this case you just have to sort of assume and go with the idea that do the players that they brought in are they we're going to assume they're healthy. And so I look at what Atlanta has, and the biggest, I think, development for the Hawks next season compared to the end of this season is that you're bringing back Jalen Johnson, who was on probably the trajectory to be a potential all-star player, a guy who is a two-way 6'8", 6'9" guy that can do most everything. And Atlanta, when you talk about how do you build around Trae Young, who obviously we know has some defensive deficiencies, but offensively great passer, a guy who can score. Maybe he hasn't shot it nearly as well as his reputation, but Trae Young needs to be surrounded by a certain type of player. And you look at what the Hawks have built with Risa Shea and with Dyson Daniels after they got him from the Pelicans. And now you add Nikhil Alexander Walker, you add Porzingis to Onyeka Kangwu, and you've just got a bunch of long, rangy guys that play both ends of the floor. I think they have a pretty good passing team, a pretty high IQ team. I'm actually, if the Hawks can stay healthy, I'm actually pretty high on where they are in the diluted Eastern Conference. I don't think it's a ridiculous statement that if they stay healthy, I think the Hawks can be a top four team in the East. I really do. Because I just don't think when you look at the rest of the conference, and we're going to go through this, I don't know what the rest of the East really presents in terms of teams that can finish in the top four. And I think if Atlanta can stay healthy with Porzingis and you bring back Jalen Johnson, he's close to being back to what he was pre-injury. To me, I think the Hawks are in pretty good position to certainly get out of the play-in where they've been mired for the last few years. And I think they got a chance to be a top 4 seed. I like what Atlanta has done. I don't think anybody that they lost really moves the needle.
All right. We'll see what happens with them. All right. The Boston Celtics. I'm before I even read this, they've gotten worse. Okay. we're gonna say that. All right. They have added Bang Bang George Niang. We talked about him last week. They added Luke Garza today. Josh Minot. I've never even heard of it. I don't even know who Josh Minot is. Do you know who Josh Minot is? Would you have known Josh Minot before
I would
this?
not know Josh Minot if he walked into the room.
And Anthony Simons. They lost Drew Holiday, Luke Cornett, Kristaps Porzingis, and obviously they are out without Jason Tatum. Okay. And that's where they're at. The Celtics are worse. And that's there's nothing we can even say to disagree with. You won't disagree with me on that, right, Mike? They're way worse.
Boston is definitively worse. They are now looking at, I think, potentially could they still compete for maybe getting out of the play-in? Possibly. I think they're more
the
likely a
East is
playoff team.
diluted. Mike, the East is diluted. They have I'm not willing to say they're not going to be like the 6th seed. Like
I'm
the
saying
East.
they could. I think they're competing. I think they're going to be in a group that's going to compete for the 6, maybe the 5, 6 through the play-in. I think that's where Boston's going to fall. And when you look at what Boston did, I think it became clear they were facing some challenges even with Tatum in terms of the money and the cost of the roster and with the sale of the team. And there was lots of financial questions, even with Tatum being healthy heading into this next season, especially had they let's just say that Tatum didn't tear his Achilles and they lost to the Knicks. There still would have been questions about, can we keep this team together? Is it still a championship roster? And so for them to be able to get off Drew Holiday's contract, get off Porzingis' contract, get back in Anthony Simons, a guy who has deficiencies, especially on the defensive end of the floor. He doesn't necessarily fit what Boston has been for the past few years. But Anthony Simons is a really good offensive player who can shoot. He's going to score a lot of points for the Celtics this coming year. And we know what George Niang can do. I don't know that I trust George as a playoff player just because of his defensive deficiencies, but as an offensive player, a guy who can make threes and space the floor, he kind of fits the way Boston has played. So clearly Boston is worse. And I think obviously there was questions about whether or not they'd be looking to try to trade Jaylen Brown. I would guess still that you wouldn't do that. I'd be surprised if anything happens in that area over the rest of the summer. I think you run it back with the group that you have at this point, and then reassess after this season and see where Tatum's at in his ability to come back. And then you still, if Tatum's back to full strength, then you still have Tatum and Brown that you're building around, and then you figure out what you're going to do with the rest of the group. And obviously, they still have Derek White, who they didn't trade as well. So Boston is clearly worse, but at the same time, I think that with the Tatum injury, they've put themselves in good position to be able to bounce back in 2 years and maybe not be a title contender right off the bat, but certainly to be able to put together another group around Tatum and Brown where they will have the potential to maybe build out another championship roster before those guys get too old.
All right. The Brooklyn Nets. Oh, Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Nets re-signed Zaire Williams and Deron Sharp. They've added Terrence Mann and Michael Porter Jr. They've lost Cam Johnson via trade to the Nuggets and D'Angelo Russell and Trendon Watford. This team is I struggle to say this, but I think they're worse, right? I mean, they were bad. They had flashes last year, but I mean, Cam Johnson's probably Michael Porter Jr. if he's healthy is probably as equivalent to Cam Johnson, right? Like they're kind of equivalent, maybe. They're different. I know they're different players, but
yeah, but similar theory, size, shooting. I would say Michael Porter Jr. probably maybe the more talented offensive player. It's in terms of his ability at 6'10" to shoot the ball consistently. Cam Johnson probably a little bit better on the defensive end, although I think since he's gone to Brooklyn, how people feel about him defensively compared to how they felt when he came out of Phoenix, I think maybe his defense hasn't been as good when he's been in Brooklyn. Although, again, when you're competing on a team that is at the bottom of the conference versus a team when he was in Phoenix that was making their way to the NBA Finals, your defensive intensity level may vary. But yeah, I think clearly the Nets at this point, look, they had 5 first round picks and nobody thought they were going to make all 5 of those 1st round picks and keep those guys or keep the picks. And they ended up just making all 5 picks. And we're not really going to talk too much about the draft, but I think in this case, it's worth just mentioning that
I forgot
they're
the
going to
draft
have,
was after our last episode, Mike.
yeah, but they're going to have five. I mean, they're going to have 5 dudes that are all, as a 1st round draft pick, are going to have guaranteed contracts. So you're talking about 5 rookies that are going to be on your roster that are going to be important players for you either this year or moving forward. And if you have that many rookies on your team, usually not a good sign. I mean, you look at the Nets and you say, okay, who's you're looking at Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas, 2 guys who, let's just say, are not known for their ability to pass the ball. So I don't know. This team is going to be, I would say, pretty bad. Cam Johnson probably has a chance to, he's going to probably put up 25 a game, I would guess. And who knows what the rest of this team is. I think Brooklyn is in a wait and see position where obviously going into this year, this summer, everybody thought, hey, they got a lot of cap space and maybe they're going to do some stuff. And they took on Terrence Mann's contract and they may end up taking on some other contracts just to sort of allow teams to park their cap space or use their cap space to be able to park some money while the Nets are going through this season. But man, this team's rough. I think they're clearly going to be one of the worst. Let's just call it one of the 5 worst teams in the league. And I have no idea if any of those guys they drafted are going to be good or not. I know the first guy, Yegor from Brigham Young, that people feel like he was kind of a reach that maybe they went for him early, and then there's a lot of other unknowns. Let's put it this way with the guys that they drafted, and just having 5 draft picks on your team seems crazy. So I
Yeah.
think Brooklyn is worse, but probably worse by design.
Yeah. All right. The Charlotte Hornets have added Pat Connaughton, Mason Plumlee, which I saw a fun stat that Mason Plumlee is making 42 times the amount of, or 22 times the amount of money as Caitlin Clark or something ridiculous, which is crazy to me. Colin Sexton was added. Departures, Yusuf Nurkic and Mark Williams. So they basically just traded their 2 centers, big centers away, and they signed Mason Plumlee, Pat Connaughton. I think this team, I mean, listen, the Hornets aren't going to be great. They're going to be okay. I think they're probably better though because Mark Williams and I mean, I don't know. Are they better? I don't know. This team doesn't matter. They're bad. But they might be slightly better because I like Colin Sexton. That's what I'm going to say. I mean,
Okay, I think they're better. In this NBA, I know there's been a lot of talk that, for example, the Lakers really trying to get a center. Phoenix obviously loaded up on centers, but I still think that the center position is one where if you're playing Mason Plumlee versus you're playing Nurkic or Mark Williams, is there really that much of a tremendous drop off for a team like Charlotte? I would probably argue no. I like the Colin Sexton trade to give up Nurkic to get Sexton. Sexton's a guy who can shoot it. We saw him here in Cleveland. He's a good player, undersized, and has some limitations, but he's a guy who can get you baskets. And when you look at Charlotte, it hinges on the development of Brandon Miller. It hinges on the health and development of LaMelo Ball, who we've debated back and forth on the pod numerous times. Is LaMelo ever going to be more than a good stats, bad team guy, or can he really drive winning? And I think that's the question that Charlotte's trying to answer. And then when it comes to the draft, they picked up VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, who, if he hits with the style of play that he has, being able to be another guy in the backcourt who can handle the ball, who can do things, he's athletic, can play defense, can shoot the ball. If he reaches his potential, and now you have Edgecombe, you have LaMelo, and you have Brandon Miller, it's a pretty good trio on the perimeter. You have Colin Sexton coming in most likely, you would think, off the bench, although maybe he starts and Edgecombe comes off the bench at first. I think this team is definitely better. It just comes down to how good is LaMelo really, and can he drive winning, and what's the development like for Brandon Miller? And so all those questions are unknown, but Charlotte is better. But what does better get them? I'm not really sure.
All right. Well, that was the most succinct one we've had so far, Mike. Good job.
Here we go.
All right. The Chicago Bulls. I don't know how much we're gonna have to say on this one. The Chicago Bulls re-signed Trey Jones. They traded Lonzo Ball to the Cavs for Isaac Okoro. They're
What do you say?
I mean, I'd rather have
here's
Lonzo Ball than Isaac Okoro at this. If Lonzo Ball is healthy, I'd rather have Lonzo Ball. True or false?
correct. But if you're the Chicago, yes, true. That's definitely true. If you're the Chicago Bulls, what you're betting on is the fact that you had Lonzo in your building. You have as good of a feel as obviously anyone who, in terms of what his health is like. And maybe they don't feel like he's ever going to be able to play more than 20 minutes a game. And Isaac Okoro has been a good player for the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially in the regular season. There are definitely things that Okoro does well. And he's been, I wouldn't say an Iron Man, but he's been relatively durable. Certainly he's been more durable than Lonzo Ball. And so I liken it to the sort of middling starting pitcher in baseball, right? The innings eater. Isaac Okoro is going to be an innings eater for the Bulls compared to what Lonzo was able to give them. And then conversely, we'll talk about the Cavs in a minute, but the upside of what you could get if Lonzo is relatively healthy, and even if he could give you 20 minutes a night, and he could give you that in the regular season, and he could give that to you in the playoffs, the skill set that Lonzo has is, I would say, far superior to the skill set that Isaac Okoro brings to the table. So I'm not sure what the Bulls were doing other than trying to get a guy who actually can be on the court for extended minutes throughout the regular season, and they just don't trust Lonzo's health. I don't know what the Bulls are. I don't know, good, worse, better. The Bulls, to me, it's sad that franchise is pretty much a non-entity. They're not a factor in free agency. They're not interesting in any way. They don't really have any fun players. I don't really know what the plan is. I think the hope, if you're a Chicago Bulls fan, I think every Bulls fan probably goes to bed at night just praying that the Reinsdorfs are going to sell the Bulls and get somebody in there who will spend money and do with that franchise as the
kind of like what the Guardians. How we feel about the
in
Guardians.
the third biggest market. It's crazy that they haven't been able to put anything together in whatever 30 years since Jordan retired.
All right, the Cavs re-signed Sam Merrill. Maybe paid him a little too much money. I don't know. Lonzo Ball acquired via trade. Larry Nance Jr. agreed to a deal today. Ty Jerome is gone. Isaac Okoro is traded. Here's what I'm going to say. I want to go back to our trade deadline episode, and I tried to find it. I went back and listened to the episode. I'm like 99% certain I said that Larry Nance Jr. would be a perfect fit for the Cavs in that because he was kind of there. He had been floated out about possibly being traded, and I said if we could get Larry Nance Jr., that would be huge. I think that's the best move that we made, is bringing him in. And I'm not expecting Larry Nance Jr. to come in and score 25 points a game. I'm not expecting him to score 20 points, 10 points. I'm expecting him to be versatile on the both offensive and defensive end of the floor. But more importantly, here's what I'm going to say. This is going to free up the DeAndre Hunter having to play the 4 minutes. Okay. This is going to help us out. There's also been reports that we are linked to Al Horford. Now, I don't know if the signing of Larry Nance Jr. gets rid of the Al Horford possibility. I don't know how much Al Horford is going to command on the market. But if Al Horford is on the end of his career, okay, and it would be hilarious if Al Horford ended his career in Cleveland just because of all the drama with his sister and stuff from the LeBron time. I think it would be hilarious to have Al Horford on this team. But I think if they could somehow make the money work and get Al Horford, because I don't have any idea how much Larry Nance Jr. is getting paid. I didn't see that. But if we could get Horford, I think this would be really, really good. If you're expecting Al Horford to play 10 to 15 minutes in the center position, I think that's doable. I think that's doable. From every indication, Windhorst said today, the Cavs are not training any of their core four. Don't believe anything that if there are people saying they're floating around, there's not. not happening. He's like, I talked to multiple people. Even if LeBron is available via trade and Cavs are one of his places that he wants to go, the Cavs aren't willing to depart, like to blow it up completely. That's what Windhorst said. Now, once again, I think Windhorst is pretty connected. I think Windhorst knows what he's talking about. I mean, he famously knew what's going on in Utah, did the pointing memes, and said, something's going on in Utah, and then they traded everybody away. Okay, I think Windhorst is pretty connected. Am I saying that if LeBron says he wants to get traded and the Cavs aren't going to consider it? I think they would be stupid to not consider it. We'll talk about the opt-in by LeBron and like all the messaging when we get to the Lakers. But I think the Cavs are probably, there's a lot of tears being shed in Cleveland about Ty Jerome leaving. There's lots of tears being shed about the Cleveland Browns stadium being moved to Brook Park. There's lots of whining going on the internet, the Guardians being terrible. But I think theoretical Lonzo Ball is probably equivalent to Ty Jerome and probably a better defender than Ty Jerome. Okay. I think Larry Nance Jr. Is more versatile than Isaac Okoro. And if we can get one other guy in here, and once again, I don't know what the money situation is going to look like. Then I'm okay with where we're at. I think if anything, it's a lateral move, and we're basically running it back with, a theoretical Lonzo Ball. But I think Larry Nance is the key to this. I think. Because I think we are deep enough in positions, the guard position, to carry the Ty Jerome weight, as long as everybody's healthy. And you've got to remember that when Ty Jerome was terrible, Donovan Mitchell was also injured, and Darius Garland was also injured, and we didn't have someone going, and we looked at Ty Jerome to do something, and he couldn't. Once again, we're putting a lot on the heels of Lonzo Ball has to be healthy. All the other guys have to be healthy. But in the degraded East, the taken apart East, I think we're in a good spot. I think we're probably, maybe, theoretically slightly better because of our defensive versatility and Larry Nance Jr. being able to slide in and play the four and let DeAndre Hunter not have to play the four and things like that, as I mentioned. So sorry, I kind of went on a rant there, Mike. I apologize.
No, you're good. I'm just going to hit on each one of these transactions quickly and then talk about the overall scope of where the Cavs are. So Sam Merrill has one elite skill as a shooter, and that skill that he has is valuable. And I don't know that how much they paid him makes me feel great, but at the same time, I'm okay with it. The way the cap's going up, Sam Merrill's a valuable guy who can shoot the ball, and you can always use players who can shoot the ball. Is he as stout as you would like him to be on defense? Probably not. Is he a guy that could get played off the floor in a playoff series? Probably. But he's also a guy who competes and he can make shots. So I was okay with that signing. The Lonzo trade, to me, if Lonzo's healthy, it's a home run. Lonzo has way more offensive skill than Isaac Okoro does. He can shoot the three. He can pass. He's a connector. Anybody who's ever played with him says that he's a great guy. He's fun to play with. And then defensively, Lonzo is probably, I would say, at worst, the equal of Isaac Okoro. And so if you get a healthy Lonzo, to me, that trade is a big win. And I look at it that there's really no downside because, like I said earlier, Isaac Okoro is an innings eater in the regular season, but he's proven himself in the last three postseasons to basically be unplayable. Teams don't guard him even if he makes threes. And the honest truth is he doesn't make very many in the playoffs. And so he proved himself to be a guy that couldn't be on the floor. So you're losing somebody who, when you look at the Cavs and where they're at right now in terms of their development as a team, the regular season next year is irrelevant. We're now at the point where this team, the only thing that matters is the playoffs. And Okoro is going to be a zero in the playoffs. So I'm okay with seeing him go. Ty Jerome had a great regular season last year. He was awesome. He helped the Cavs win a bunch of games. He swung multiple games with his performance off the bench. And against the Pacers in the playoffs, he was horrendous. And he had the one game, I forget, was that game 1 or 2 where he went 1 of 16. He was terrible. And they're going to miss him in the regular season. But again, if Lonzo is healthy and can give him minutes, I don't think they're going to miss him that much. And obviously, just like any other team, like we talked about off the top with the Hawks, the Cavs have to be healthy. If they're healthy, then you're not going to miss Ty Jerome that much. If Lonzo is not healthy or one of the other guards go down, then you might feel the loss of Ty Jerome. But overall, I think that Lonzo move is a great move. It's well worth the risk because again, Okoro to me was a zero in the playoffs. And then the Larry Nance piece, when you look at what the Cavs tried to do defensively in terms of their front court, it felt like when Allen or Mobley was out of the game, you're struggling to find, do we play a second big? And we saw the development of Larry Nance over the course of his career. He started to be able to develop the ability to shoot threes, which he didn't have when he came into the league. And now he's at least a semi-credible three-point shooter. And you talked about his versatility on offense, on defense. He's a good passer. He plays hard. He wants to, I'm sure, be here back in his hometown. And so I really like the addition of Larry Nance Jr. And to your point about keeping the core four guys together, I think if the Cavs had any thought of trading any of those four guys, probably once you see that Damian Lillard is out, Jason Tatum is out, Tyrese Halliburton is out, that the top of the East has been decimated. And if you're the Cavs, you look at it and you say, hey, we won 64 games last year. We ran into a buzzsaw in the playoffs against the Pacers where they had multiple guys who shot it incredibly well against the Cavs, whether you want to attribute that to Cavalier defense or just the team getting hot, but they had things that went wrong against Indiana. Obviously, the injuries, Garland with the toe surgery. There's a million things that they can talk themselves into. What happened in the postseason was kind of a fluke. Why not run it back with a 64 win team in a conference that's going to be significantly worse, where the Cavs should still be getting better. Darius Garland should still be getting better. Evan Mobley still should be getting better. And so if you think about the continued development of Evan Mobley, we've been saying it forever. If Mobley ever gets to the point where he's your best player, now you're talking about an NBA title contending team. And we thought we were there last year, even with Mobley being probably the second best player. But this team is good enough to get to the NBA finals, especially in the East, the way it's been weakened. I wouldn't be that opposed to them making some kind of a move, depending upon what they could get, and move off of Jared Allen, who hasn't been great in the playoffs either. So I'd be okay if they moved off Jared Allen, but otherwise, I mean, it's just the conference is so down. And I know you sent me a clip from LeBron and KD talking about small backcourts, and I've been on that for a while, that the Garland Mitchell backcourt, two guys that are 6'1" and sort of tilt offensively more than defensively, makes me nervous. Can you win a title when you look at the size and the physicality that was on display in the finals with the Pacers and the Thunder? Makes me wonder, could those two guys hold up defensively against those kind of teams over a 7-game series? And obviously against the Pacers, it proved that they couldn't. Now, again, Garland wasn't healthy. So I have some concerns about the small backcourt, which leads me to think that if the right deal was out there that included Darius Garland, if you could get a guy back or multiple guys back who fit better, or you could somehow use that to bring back LeBron, I wouldn't be 100% opposed to that. I love Darius Garland. I think he would be. I just don't love him and Mitchell together as a small backcourt. So this team's going to be really good. They're going to win a lot of games. They should win 60 games again next year, but it doesn't matter because all that matters is the playoffs.
All right, Mike, we've done 6 teams in 30 minutes. We might have to.
We're good. Well, we knew we were going to talk about the Cavs for a lot longer than most teams, so we'll pick it up.
Okay,
we'll pick it up.
Dallas, it added D'Angelo Russell. That's it. Kyrie's out.
It's not it. They added a pretty important piece in the draft.
Well, Cooper Flag. That's true. They're better. They'll be way better if Kyrie comes back healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're better, they're worse. It's hard to quantify, right? Because without Kyrie, you're struggling in the backcourt. I guess D'Angelo Russell is
Cooper
a
Flag at the
poverty
point,
stricken.
baby. Cooper Flag at the point. I've seen
D'Angelo,
that. Cooper
okay,
Flag at the
maybe you
point.
throw it. Well, at this point, right, Dallas without Kyrie really isn't going anywhere. And next season, I guess. But see, Nico said they're going to be contending sooner rather than later, and the window is now. Anthony Davis, who knows how many healthy years he has left. At this point, the
Zero.
Dallas Mavericks have,
He's
yeah, right. The Dallas Mavericks should or have or will reorient their team around the timeline of Cooper Flag, and it'll be interesting to see if Flag is as good as everybody feels like he's going to be, and he's been labeled as a can't miss guy, and we'll see. We'll see if he ends up being that. Clearly, he has the athleticism from all indications, the competitive drive, and I would expect that he's going to be pretty good right away out of the gate. But again, he's an 18-year-old kid. And so, how much impact is he going to have on winning in Dallas? That I'm not sure. But the reality is, if Dallas is doing anything besides trying to develop Flag and get him to the point where he can be maximizing his potential, then they're doing it wrong. Because this team, it's not going anywhere as constituted without Kyrie. If you had a healthy Kyrie Irving with this roster, they'd be interesting. But without Kyrie, I just don't. They just don't have enough.
all right. The Denver Nuggets. They've added Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jonas Valanciunas. They lost Michael Porter Jr. and Dario Saric. This team is better, Mike.
Absolutely.
This team was on the cusp of beating the Thunder last year. This like a few months ago, less than 2 months ago, a month ago, and they just got the floor. I mean, you look. Bruce Brown obviously was on their championship team. Okay, all right. Cam Johnson and Tim Hardaway Jr. can spread the floor and shoot the ball. Tim Hardaway Jr. is he the guy I wanted to shoot a crunch time three with down one with? There's a lot worse in the league, and sometimes he does chuck up a lot of shots. Cam Johnson is a pretty darn good player, spread the floor, and Valanciunas is not a pushover. I think this team is supremely better. Let me say this, Mike. I think this is the contender with the Thunder next year, if everybody's healthy. I just, and I mean, obviously Jamal Murray has to play at a level, but I think this covers up a lot of stuff and gives them some flexibility with things. And I think of all the teams, and maybe I'll change my mind as we go through all these because it's hard. This is a nice way to look at it, like a whole snapshot. I think this team by far won free agency so far. And maybe another team will eclipse my thoughts as we go here. But as I'm like thinking about what I know and what I remember, because it's been a lot, I think Denver is definitely one of the biggest winners in free agency.
Agreed. I think there's a couple things to say here. One, if you look at the article that Jason and I are looking at, it says re-signing and it says NA. And so the name that's missing there, do you know what name is missing there?
Your favorite player, one of your favorite players, Russell Westbrook.
Russell Westbrook has not re-signed with the Denver Nuggets. And then you look at the additions, who you mentioned, Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson, Tim
If you got
Hardaway
Russell
Jr.
Westbrook for a veteran minimum for the Cleveland Cavaliers, would you take him or not?
No,
Okay.
no. But Denver in the playoff series against Oklahoma City, they were basically down to playing 6 guys.
And one of them was Russell Westbrook.
One of them was Russell Westbrook. One of them was Michael Porter Jr. with one arm. And then you had Peyton Watson, who got in a little bit. You had the one Julian Strother game. But for the most part, the Nuggets trusted 6 guys to play. And I look at the 4 guys that they added. You take away Michael Porter Jr., so you're down to 4. But now you add 4 guys who I feel like Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson, both have played on NBA Finals teams. Brown obviously won the title with the Nuggets. Tim Hardaway Jr. has played in plenty of playoff games and is a guy who I wouldn't be afraid to have him as my 7th or 8th guy on a team. And Valanciunas has limitations, clearly, but you're asking him to play some of those backup center minutes behind Jokic. I think he's certainly capable of doing that both in the regular season and the playoffs. So they've taken themselves from what was, in essence, a 6-man team with one of those players being Russell Westbrook to an 8-player team. Plus, maybe you get the development of Peyton Watson, or maybe Strother, one of those guys, pops and is able to play more minutes and become more impactful. And so I think clearly, yes, Denver is better. They will, in some circumstances, miss Michael Porter Jr., but he's been inconsistent. Obviously, he's been injury prone, and there's a reason why Denver wanted to deal him. And Cam Johnson maybe has a slightly lower upside in terms of Michael Porter Jr.'s best performances might be better than what Cam Johnson is capable of producing. But night in and night out, Cam Johnson is probably the more consistent player and probably brings a little bit more on the defensive end of the floor. So, yeah, Denver is definitely better. And what's interesting is going into the offseason, I think most people thought Denver was kind of stuck, that they'd have a hard time trading Michael Porter Jr. because of his contract, and there wasn't a whole lot that they could do. And so kudos to the Denver front office for being able to pull off what they've done. I think they definitely are one of the winners of free agency. I agree with you.
All right. Detroit Pistons. Re-signed Paul Reed, added Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson, lost Tim Hardaway, Dennis Schroeder. I mean, I think they're about the same.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right? Karis LeVert and Dennis Schroeder, very similar players. Duncan Robinson, Tim Hardaway, very similar players. I think they're about the same.
The Pistons' development depends on two things. Well, it depends on multiple things, but Cade continuing to ascend into one of the top 10 players in the league. Can he do that? Can he reach that level? You have Jaden Ivey coming back off an injury. Can he develop into the type of player that people thought he might be coming out of Purdue? And then Ausar Thompson, who's been more hurt than Amen. Obviously, Amen popped in a way with the Rockets last year that people were like, holy cow, what is this guy? What's his potential? And Ausar has shown flashes of that for the Pistons. Hasn't maybe reached the same level of consistency that his brother has. But I think the development of those three guys, when you look at the Detroit Pistons' future, that's where the Detroit Pistons' future lies, not in any of these kind of small moves around the margin. So it'll be interesting to see how those young guys develop for Detroit. And look, there's opportunity for the Pistons. Obviously, they played the Knicks really well in the playoffs this year and pushed them right to the brink. And so if Cade continues to develop, I think that with the watered down Eastern Conference that we're looking at for this year, Detroit certainly should be a team that is going to be a top 6 team. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Okay. Golden State Warriors. Well, this is an easy one. They lost Kevon Looney. They're the same. I mean, Looney, did Looney play a huge role on their team? I mean, he played in some minutes, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, not a ton. I mean, you're losing. He's a guy who's been an important part of their team over the last 5, 6, 7 years, but I don't think he really moves the needle. Golden State probably still has one big move to make with Kuminga. I doubt come next season that Jonathan Kuminga is going to be on the Warriors. So I think that where their roster is right now maybe isn't how it's going to finish, because I do think that there's probably a Kuminga trade coming. I would say that just because of the Warriors' age of Steph and Jimmy Butler, I would say the Warriors next year are going to be worse just because of the age of their best players. But who knows? Maybe you trade Kuminga and you're able to get some veteran guy in there that fits better with what Golden State wants to do, and maybe that allows them to be better. But yeah, they're the same or worse only because of the age is what I would say.
All right. The other team that I would consider as maybe the winners of this, depending on how things go, the Houston Rockets. They re-signed a whole bunch of guys. They re-signed a whole bunch of guys. They added Clint Capella back in the fold. Welcome back, Clint Capella, to Houston. They added Kevin Durant. They added Dorian Finney-Smith. They lost Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, of course, with the trade to get Durant. this team's better. This team is better, and I think they are the other team in the West. Once again, I'm glad to be saying that the Western Conference is getting all these really good teams, and the Eastern Conference continues to be abysmal.
JV level.
Yeah. Anyways, hey, listen, it works for LeBron for 4 straight years. Well, I'm not going to complain, okay? All right. Or 8 straight years, I should say. I'm not going to complain. But yeah, this team's better. It'll be interesting to see how they all gel and work together. But once again, Udoka is a great coach, and Houston's going to figure it out. I mean, they're the 2 seed this year, and they just got better. Okay. So it's really going to be interesting to watch them play together. It's going to be interesting to watch them compete with the Thunder and the Nuggets and see, because I think those 3 teams are the 3 teams in the West to beat. And I know we haven't even talked about Minnesota yet, but I think that's where I'm at. I think this team is definitely better.
Houston is definitely better. If you just look at it and you say, okay, the guys that they added, forget about the guys that they re-signed that came back to be a part of their team. You bring in Kevin Durant, say what you want, 37 years old. Last year, he still averaged 27 points a game. Maybe he has some issues in terms of his surliness or his leadership or whatever, but Kevin Durant is still Kevin Durant. Every time he shoots the ball, I don't expect him to miss. And you're basically replacing Jalen Green, who in the playoff series against Golden State this year had 1 good game and then was objectively horrible in all the rest of the games. And you're replacing him with one of the best, probably 15 players in the history of the league, despite the fact that he's 37. So that's a clear upgrade. Then you look at, I think the Dorian Finney-Smith deal, to me, is a really important move for the Rockets. One, it takes him away from other potential contenders in the West, takes him away from the Lakers and away from somebody else who may have signed him. But if you look at it apples to apples, him replacing Dillon Brooks, Finney-Smith's a better three-point shooter, maybe obviously not as feisty, but maybe just as good of a defensive player as Dillon Brooks. And so at worst, that's a even up swap, those 2 guys. So the Durant-Jalen Green upgrade is huge. And then you look at the contracts that the Rockets have been able to get, right? Fred VanVleet was due to make like $45 million this year or $40 million. And instead they get him to sign 2 years, $50 million. So they get a discount. Jabari Smith signed a 5-year, $122. I know that wasn't the max. He took a little bit less than a max extension. And so that gives you flexibility moving forward. And we already talked a little bit about Amen Thompson's development. And I know last year they got Şengün to sign a deal that was a little bit less than the max, which just allowed them to re-sign all these guys that we're talking about and enabled them to get Dorian Finney-Smith along the margins. And this team clearly is better. And as you said, Udoka is a good coach, and the continued development of their young guys. We didn't even talk about Reed Shepherd, who was the number 3 pick in the draft last year, who barely could play at all, and who knows what the plans are for him. I know I've heard it on multiple podcasts, so I'll just repeat what I've heard many times, but it's clearly obvious that if this team wants to at some point, they have a lot of pieces, still young guys that other teams would want that are on good contracts, that potentially they could make another trade should somebody else big come available.
Yeah.
And so they put themselves in a really good position with the roster they have now. And they've also left themselves open to the possibility that if there is another star or another guy that fits what they're trying to do becomes available, they could potentially still have another trade left in them without decimating the roster. So I love what Houston has done. I think if you look at the top of the West, clearly Houston, Denver, and Oklahoma City, it feels like they've separated themselves from the rest of the Western Conference.
Okay, we are a third through the league, Mike, and we're at 45 minutes. So
we're going, man. We're working. We've had a couple quick ones.
Indiana Pacers. Oh, man. This team's lost Miles Turner. No one got added. No one re-signed. Miles Turner gone in free agency. Tyrese Haliburton obviously injured. This team's not going to be good. Lightning in a bottle, as you have put it. I've got to feel I feel bad for them now. I feel bad because the fact that Miles Turner, after all these years of being talked about being traded, has never left, and then Milwaukee goes ahead and signs him and waives Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard gets paid $22 million a year for the next 5 years to not play basketball for them, and he gets to sign a contract on top of that because he was waived with the team that he wants, and he's making that money on top. It's kind of like a rehire situation. It's crazy, and obviously Dame Lillard's not going to play next year, I don't think. I highly doubt it. But man, Indiana, wowzers.
It's going to be a big drop for an NBA Finals team. Clearly, the loss of Halliburton is huge. As you just cited before the pod, I said in some ways, Indiana, it feels like they caught lightning in a bottle with some of their shooting and some of the comeback wins and all the things we've been talking about throughout their playoff run. And unfortunately, all that is going to come crashing down. I still think Indiana probably has a chance in the East to compete for maybe getting out of the play-in and being a 6 seed, maybe based on, again, not their own qualifications, but just based on the fact that the East is so bad. But I expect them to finish somewhere between the 6 and 10 range in the Eastern Conference. And it's just a shame what happened to Halliburton. Obviously impacted Game 7, but the impact that it's going to have on the Pacers season and losing Turner, yeah, I think Indiana is going to drop in the standings, and I think they'll be lucky to stay out of the play-in.
All right. Clippers re-signed Nick Batum and James Harden.
Worse.
Added Brook Lopez.
Worse.
Positive for Brook Lopez. He's a huge Disney fan. Now he's like 15 minutes from Disneyland.
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
They lost Drew. They lost
anything
Drew
that
Eubanks. They lost Drew Eubanks.
James Harden for $80 million. Come on, man. What are we doing? Didn't anybody in the Clippers organization watch James Harden in Game 7? Haven't they watched his career? I just don't understand. Look, I know they have Kawhi. I know they had a great end to their regular season, but I'll say it again. If the answer to your question is James Harden, then you're asking the wrong questions.
All right. Okay. I'm going to say they stay about the same. Anyways, all right. Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron opts in. I guess this is probably the time for us to talk about that. Jake LaRavia signs. I don't know who Jake LaRavia is. And they lost Dorian Finney-Smith. All right. So the question is, LeBron, you're opting in because you don't want to give up the $53 million. I got it. But how could you have Rich Paul put out that statement about he understands that the Lakers are building for the future and he doesn't know if dude, you don't need the $53 million. You don't. You are a billionaire. $53 million is a little drop in the bucket, dude. If you want to go somewhere else, don't opt in and sign somewhere else. I don't get it. I don't understand the point of the $53 million opt-in and then putting out the statement. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. There had been reports that DeAndre Ayton was maybe going to sign with the Lakers. That hasn't happened yet. Because I don't know, he has to clear waivers, right? Is that right? Because he was being a buyout. So anyways, I just don't. I guess that's my big thing with the Lakers. Like, I think at this point, I feel like LeBron will be a member of the Lakers when the season starts because I just don't know that there's a trade market and that's willing to trade for a 41-year-old aging super. Like, even though he's the second greatest player in all time. Okay. I don't know that there's a huge market, and I don't know what I've seen a lot of wild trade. People have been going buck wild on the trade machine on ESPN, trying to figure out how to get him to Cleveland. I was all for it. We were talking, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, bring LeBron to Cleveland. We were all for it, but not for $53 million. I just can't. I mean, Jarrett Allen, Darius, are you willing to give up Jarrett Allen, Darius Garland, and something else to get LeBron? Like, I don't know. Like, at that point, now if you can, I guess if you can keep everyone else maybe you can twist my arm, but we need a center. That's the same situation they were in this past season. They don't have a center. Then I don't know.
Well, here's my take on it. Yes, LeBron wanted his 53 million. If he really wanted to win a championship, that wasn't the best way to go about doing it. Saying that they're going to monitor the roster and the Lakers moves, and then the first thing that happens is you lose Dorian Finney-Smith, who, look, he's not setting the world on fire, but he's a guy who can play in big moments. He can play in the playoffs. 3-and-D guy, has made big shots in his career, and you take a defensive player off the roster on a team that already has Austin Reeves, Luka, and LeBron, who are defensively challenged. Let's just put it that way. They still have no center. Now, as you said, maybe Aiton is on the way there. There's still some guys out there that potentially they could go get either as free agents or in trade. But this is not a championship roster unless Luka comes back in the absolute peak physical condition, which the odds of that happening, I'd say, are pretty low. And even then, I'm not sure that this roster is a championship roster in any way, shape, or form. And as you said, the ability for the Lakers to trade LeBron and get anything back, I feel is just it's super limited. One, if you just go through and you look, what team does he make sense for? I guess you could say a team at the middle or the back of the pack that would trade for LeBron, but he's got a no trade clause, so he's not going to one of those teams just as a box office draw. And then you look at the contenders, and what contender in either conference is going to give up two or three of their core players to bring in 40-year-old LeBron James making $53 million. I just don't think it's feasible. Now, could it happen? Could a team talk themselves into it? Could the Cavs, as you said, talk themselves into a Darius Garland, Jared Allen for LeBron? You could maybe be talked into that, but it doesn't seem like a likely scenario. So I don't know. I just think it's always interesting with LeBron. There's always a wink wink. There's always a subversion. There's always some kind of drama that gets stirred up whenever he or Rich Paul or anybody, whenever they're doing anything, it can never be straightforward. And it certainly isn't straightforward at this point. Just like you, I think he probably is on the Lakers roster when the season starts. But at this point, nothing would really surprise me. And plus, now you have a new Lakers ownership, so who knows what their thoughts are. There's just a lot of moving parts. Ultimately, LeBron has a no trade clause, so he would dictate where he wants to go, which means he's only going to go somewhere that he could win a championship. And the reality is, I just don't know where that is in terms of what the Lakers could get back that they would want and where LeBron would be in a position where whatever that team traded out would still have a championship roster with them. It just doesn't seem likely. So I think the Lakers are worse because of the departure of Dorian Finney-Smith and the unknown of LeBron and then Luka's conditioning. Who knows? So I think the Lakers are worse.
Okay. The Memphis Grizzlies. Cam Spencer, Jaren Jackson Jr., which, by the way, did you see Jaren Jackson Jr. got hurt today?
No, I didn't see that.
He has to have some kind of surgery.
That's not good.
Off.
I didn't like the signing anyway, but now I like it even less.
Yeah, they said that they don't. There's no timeline on it either. It was something to do with a toe or a foot or something. Okay, additions: Cole Anthony, KCP, Ty Jerome. They lost Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard. I think this team's about the same. Maybe I mean, KCP. What does he do at this point? I mean, he was
misses threes.
Cole Anthony. Okay.
Cole Anthony's
Ty Jerome.
Good backup point guard.
Ty Jerome.
You basically signed two backup point guards, or you brought in two backup point guards. I just don't love the Jaren Jackson. I know that they had to sign him. He's a good player, obviously former defensive player of the year. Doesn't rebound, still foul prone. If he's your second best player, can you win a championship? I'm not convinced of that. And where is Ja in terms of his standing as a franchise guy that you can build around and have a championship roster? I just don't know where Memphis is at. I guess you're retooling and saying we're going to build or try to build a championship team around Jaron Jackson and Ja. I don't know. I don't see the vision. I don't love Jaron Jackson as much as other people maybe, but I think this team's worse than what they were a year ago.
All right, Miami Heat. They added Davion Mitchell, Simone Fontecchio. Are you proud of me? I said his name
Yeah, that
correctly.
was good. You actually pronounced it right. I like it. Good work.
And they lost Duncan Robinson. I think this team is. I don't know who Simone Fontecchio is. So, so basically, it's you got Dave. You added Davion Mitchell, and you lost Duncan Robinson. I think they're probably a lateral move. Maybe Davion Mitchell is slightly better. I mean, Duncan Robinson's a better shooter. Davion Mitchell probably better at defense.
Davion Mitchell played for them at the end of the year and played well, but I don't know why he's in the additions, not in the re-signing, because he was already on the Heat. But the bottom line is this team, if Tyler Hero or Bam Adebayo is your best player and you can pick or choose whichever one you want to be your best player, I think you're topping out at mediocre. And so this team, they're fine, whatever. In the Eastern Conference, they're going to be probably battling down in there in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 range. Who knows, depending on their health. But for Miami, it's definitely an unglamorous team and definitely doesn't fit the pattern of what they normally do in terms of trying to make a big splash, either with a trade or a free agent signing. To me, this team's pretty boring, and I think a very mediocre team heading into next season.
The Milwaukee Bucks, not boring at all here. The
No, they got a
Milwaukee
lot going
Bucks
on.
re-signed Porter Jr., Bobby Portis, Torian Prince, Jericho Sims, Gary Trent Jr. They added, oh god, Vasily Mich,
Vasily, Vasily
Vasily
Micic.
Micic, Miles Turner, Gary Harris. They lost Pat Connaughton and Brook Lopez, and they also waived Damian Lillard and paying him $22 million. This is a listen. Jimmy Haslam had quite a day today, Mike. Jimmy Haslam had quite a day today. They announced the stadium. They announced that they're going to waive a guy who has an Achilles injury. And they're going to pay him $22 million a year. So we now know that Jimmy Haslam will waive a guy who tears their Achilles. That was a little. Come on, Mike. You get the joke there? You could,
I get it. I got it. I'm on it.
Deshaun. All right. And he sold part of his stake in the Columbus Crew today. Jimmy Haslam had quite the busy day today. Anyways, uh the bottom line here is is this a desperate move to keep Giannis? Is that what this is? Like if I'm Giannis, am I getting really excited that we've signed Miles Turner?
I think Miles Turner at this point in his career is an upgrade over Brook Lopez. So there's that.
But am I
I
getting?
do
But
think that
that's not what I asked though, Mike. Am I getting
no, he's
excited?
not excited. He's not excited. I think the question for Milwaukee still comes down to is Giannis okay playing in Milwaukee, trying to compete with teams that are not as good as the teams at the top of the conference, where maybe because Giannis is as good as he is, that he can carry a mediocre roster to the NBA Finals in a weakened Eastern Conference. Maybe this team is not in any way, shape, or form a championship roster. I think it's better with Miles Turner than it is with Brook Lopez. And kudos to the Bucks front office for doing the I don't know if it's cold hearted thing, but buying out, waiving Damian Lillard, which frees up the space to be able to get the Miles Turner deal done. Dame was a lost, whatever, a sunk cost because he wasn't going to come back and play next year. And honestly, that trade never really worked out. Those two guys never meshed the way that many people thought they would. The Buck situation just comes down to at what point is Giannis happy and satisfied to continue to plug along in Milwaukee and not really have a chance to win a title, or does he begin to get a little bit disgruntled and decide he's going to ask for a trade? And if you're Milwaukee, in the Eastern Conference this year, if Giannis is healthy, they got a good chance to win 45, 46, 47, 48 games with a healthy Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I can see where Milwaukee's not in any hurry to trade him if Giannis isn't asking for a trade. Franchises go 20, 30 years waiting to have a player as good as Giannis. So maybe you just wait it out and allow your cap space and your draft picks to somehow find their way back to you where you can rebuild. Maybe you get a lucky stroke of something happening, and suddenly because you have Giannis, you're back in the conversation. So until Giannis asks out, I think Milwaukee just keeps him, and you sort of play the Atlanta Hawks, Josh Smith, and that whole Joe Johnson, that whole group. You're kind of just in the middle, and that's kind of where they're at.
All right. The Minnesota Timberwolves. They re-signed Julius Randle, Naz Reid, and Joe Ingles. They lost Nikhil Alexander Walker, Luke Garza, Josh Minott. I mean, Alexander
There's your
Walker is
guy.
the big what?
There's your guy, Josh Minott.
Oh yeah. Like Nikhil Alexander Walker is the big of their losses. That's the one name. Like Garza was okay. Josh Minott, I wouldn't know what the heck he even looks like. So, would you know? You would know who Josh Minott is, right? No idea who that guy
Well, I
is.
already said I would know him if he walked in right
I
now.
couldn't remember if
No,
that was another guy or not.
no,
Anyways,
man, it's the
I,
same guy we
I
talked about
think
earlier,
I think
man.
I think
You can't even remember him from 45 minutes ago.
Minnesota's slightly worse, maybe, but I think it's pretty lat. I mean, how big is if Nikhil Alexander Walker is the guy who's going to tip the scales for you? Then you're probably if you're relying on him to be the guy that tips the scales, it's not probably good for you. So
Yeah, they got a pretty good. I would say they got a pretty good deal with Julius Randle in terms of the money they paid him. Naz Reid was maybe slightly overpaid. I think if you're Minnesota, what you're looking at is last year they got Rob Dillingham in the draft,
yeah,
and you're hoping that Rob Dillingham can step in and replace
Dayton
Nikhil
alum.
Alexander Walker. Dillingham's not as big, probably never going to be as good of a defender as Alexander Walker, but maybe from an offensive standpoint, he gives you a little bit more. He's more dynamic. We'll see. He didn't play very much last year in the regular season or at all in the playoffs. But I'm guessing if you're Minnesota, that's what you're counting on. Minnesota's kind of the same.
All right, the New Orleans Pelicans. They've added Sadiq Bey, Kevin Lou. We talked about all these moves already. The New Orleans Pelicans, they're a lateral move. We talked about this last week, right?
Yeah. The only thing to talk about with the Pelicans is the draft. They move up to get Derek Queen, where they moved up 10 spots. And in the course of making that trade, they gave up to Atlanta an unprotected 2026 pick that is the worst of or the best of their own, I believe their own pick and Milwaukee's pick, if I'm not mistaken. So the threat of New Orleans or Minnesota or Milwaukee imploding and being very bad, and that pick being potentially a top 5 pick to move up 10 spots, probably not the best move by Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver, who have had, let's just say those two guys have had limited success in their roles as executives with teams. So I don't know that I have a lot of faith in what Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver are doing in New Orleans. That the move was questionable. Who knows if Derek Queen's been good or not, but to give up an unprotected first round pick from two teams who potentially could be really bad depending on how things go. New Orleans' whole situation just comes down to is Zion going to be healthy? And do you want to continue to build your team around him? And to this point, he's still on the Pelicans. So they're still answering that question in the affirmative that they still want to build around him. And at that point, you're just putting your entire future in a guy's hands who knows what he's going to do. And it just remains to be seen. It all comes down to what do you have in Zion Williamson? Do you have the best version of him, or do you have the guy that we've seen that can't stay on the floor? And the rest of it to me is just window dressing. Either Zion's healthy and you go forward and you build around a guy who is potentially great, or you have to cut bait and just figure out what you're going to do next. So The rest of this stuff, whatever.
All right, the New York Knicks added your favorite, or I should say, Merida's favorite player, Jordan Clarkson.
Loves to shoot.
Loves to shoot, and they added Gershon Yesubu. Oh no, I was
Yabusele. Come on, man.
so
Yabusele. Star of the French national team, buddy. Come on, man.
okay.
Dunked on
I think
LeBron.
so. So after the Knicks moves and the Cavs moves, the Knicks have leapt over the Cavs as the favorites in the East. Can you explain to me why Jordan Clarkson and Gershon
Yabusele.
Yabusele have made the? Is this just a market reaction?
I think so. I mean, Jordan Clarkson's a good player and he can score. Not a
They don't even. The Knicks
defender.
don't even have a coach, Mike.
They do not have a coach.
It's going to be
They
Mike
have Carl
Brown.
Anthony.
It's going to be Mike
It's
Brown.
probably going to be Mike Brown, based
Did
on
you
what
did
we've
you
seen.
see? Did
They
you see
still
they
have
reached
Carl
out?
Anthony
Did they?
Towns,
Did you
who
see
as
they?
good
Did
as
you see they reached out to Don Staley?
yeah, I saw that. It was
So
interesting. I'll just leave
Don
it there.
Staley retweeted a tweet. It with crying emojis was uh, Don Staley after seeing Karl Anthony Towns get his third foul in the first 6 minutes of the game, and it was her taking a clipboard and slamming it on the ground. She retweeted it with
No,
crying, laughing emoji. I thought that was pretty good.
that's funny. That's funny. Look, the Knicks still have Carl Anthony Towns, and he had his moments in the playoffs and was, I guess, far better than what I anticipated he was going to be in New York. And I guess you could look at it and say 3 years ago, the Knicks beat up the Cavs with a different roster or a lot of the different roster. I don't know. I mean, the Cavs still have to be the favorites, but I can understand if people don't trust the Cavs as a playoff team. The Knicks, this team's going to be good. I mean, the Cavs and the Knicks should be the two best teams in the Eastern Conference next year. Clarkson and Yabusele probably make them better. Obviously, they're going to have a different coach who's going to use their bench more than Tibbs used his bench. So those guys are going to get minutes, and depth will probably be more important with whoever this next coach is than it was for Tibbs. So I think the Knicks have improved themselves with these two signings. Does that push them over the top of the Cavs? I don't know. I still maintain that if Carl Anthony Towns is a big part of what you're trying to do, that it's going to be a struggle to try to do it. And the Knicks are always going to have trouble, despite the fact that they have three really good defenders in their starting lineup. Brunson and Carl Anthony Towns are always going to be a problem defensively. They're always going to get hunted in the playoffs, and you're always going to have to do things to hide them. And it's tough to build a credible defense when there's two guys on your floor on the court that at all times that you have to try to hide. It's just tough. And so the Knicks are better, but I don't think this Knicks team as constituted as a championship team. Now, maybe they can get to the NBA finals, but I don't think they're a championship team.
All right, Oklahoma City re-signed a bunch of guys with the big SGA, the richest contract in NBA history. They didn't add anyone, and they lost Dylan Jones. This team's the same. They're the same.
Same but better because they're three main guys. Maybe Shea's at his peak, but Jalen Williams and Chet are still going to get better.
Did you see Jalen Williams have been playing with an injury
Yes,
the whole playoffs? So there you go. I mean,
they're going to be better. They're going to be better next year, provided they're healthy, just like we've talked about before.
okay. All right. So this one, Orlando Magic. They added Desmond Bain. We already talked about that. They added Tyus Jones. They lost Cole Anthony's, KCP, and Gary Harris. I think this team's probably a little bit better, but I'm not like thinking they're like top 3 or 4 team in the East. Maybe they are though, because the East is so bad.
I like Bain better than you do, as we talked about last time. I think Bain fits in really well with this team. I think he's tough. He can shoot it. He's going to add to what they do defensively. KCP was horrendous last year, so replacing him with Desmond Bain is going to be a huge upgrade. The question with Orlando, I think Paolo is eventually going to get there wherever there is for him. Maybe it's top 10, maybe it's top 5. I don't know exactly where he's going to be, but he's definitely a dude. And the question for Orlando for me is Franz going to figure out what's going on with his jump shot? And he's still a very good player, but if he's going to shoot 28% from three-point land, Orlando's never going to get to their potential. But if he can get up to league average and not be afraid to shoot threes, this team's going to be much more difficult to deal with because Bane's going to make them better offensively. And I don't think he hurts them at all on the defensive end of the floor where they've been great. So I think Orlando is better. I would slot them honestly probably right behind the Knicks and Cavs.
All right, you're braver than I am, but I
There you
guess
go.
when you look at the East, I mean, it's bad. Speaking
It's
of
bad.
teams, the Philadelphia 76ers, Justin Edwards, I don't even know who that is. Trendon Watford, they added him, and they lost my boy,
Babaselli.
Yabusele. The Sixers are bad. This team's not. They've gotten worse, but I mean, it all hinges on whether Embiid can even walk. Okay, can he walk up and down the floor and participate in the game of basketball? If he can't, then this team has no hope, and I am willing to bet that he can't. The end. I mean, what else am I to say?
It depends on if Con Knipple is the next Larry Bird. If he's the next Larry Bird, then Philadelphia's on their way. There's no way you can trust this team to stay healthy. Embiid at this point, whatever. Paul George is going to be in and out of the lineup the whole season. This team's bad. And even the best case scenario, they're not going to be a threat in the playoffs. There's no way Embiid can play the number of minutes that would be required for him to play and for Philadelphia to win games for 6 weeks straight in the playoffs. It's not happening. And
Yeah.
Philadelphia's stuck and they're going to be bad for a while until they can get rid of that Embiid and Paul George, those contracts. They're going to be bad.
Yep. All right. Phoenix Suns re-signed Colin Gillespie, added Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green, Nigel Hayes Davis, and Mark Williams. They lost Durant, Tyus Jones, Cody Martin, Mason Plumlee. Okay, listen. The bottom line is this: they lost Kevin Durant, who's the best player in this trade, and in all the transactions. They lost Kevin Durant. We kind of already talked about the Kevin. Did we talk about the Kevin Durant trade last week? I can't remember.
I don't think we did. I don't think we did.
It hadn't happened yet.
Phoenix had to get off him, and
Yeah. Is
I don't know. They
Phoenix
didn't really.
here? It may be an addition by subtract. No, we did talk about it because we talked about how the log jam at shooting guard last week. We talked about that.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
So I think Phoenix is probably worse off than they were, but now they have some possible flexibility with where they go next. I don't know. Is Phoenix a team that's going to be contending for a playoff spot? Maybe a play-in spot. That's where they're at. Maybe. Probably not even that.
Maybe. I think that would be, if they could compete for the 9 or 10 spot, I think that would probably be a super success for Matt Ishbia. I mean, they added Mark Williams and they took the big Duke center Malawach in the draft. So now you went from having no centers to having two centers. You got Green and Devin Booker, who kind of are not, obviously Booker is a much better player and much more established than Jalen Green, but they both kind of operate in the same area. I don't know that they really work or make sense together. There was a lot of talk when they got Jalen Green that maybe they were going to reroute him and trade him somewhere else and try to pick up something else or dump salary or who knows. This team just doesn't really have any way to be able to improve themselves because of where they are in terms of their salaries and their roster. You got Beal on there with all the money that he's making and there's no trade clause. I don't know that Phoenix is better or worse. They weren't very good with Durant either of the years that he was there. I don't know that his departure, as good as he is, and as much as I think he helps the Rockets, I don't know how much it hurts Phoenix just based on sort of where they've been over the last 2 years. So I'm going to say that despite trading away Kevin Durant, that this team is kind of the same, which means they're going to be somewhere in the bottom 5 of the Western Conference.
Yeah. All right. Portland Trail Blazers. Re-signed Garrett Temple. We already talked about the Drew Holiday adding. They lost Anthony Simons, DeAndre Ayton via buyout. Drew Holiday wants nothing to do with being in Portland, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up leaving. Portland's worse, but they were already terrible. The end.
I mean, Drew Holiday plays, which maybe he will, and you have some interesting players in Portland. They got what's the guy's name? Tamani Kamara. You've got Shaden Sharp. You've got Scoot, who showed some signs at the end of the year last year. I just think that they played well at the end of the season. It was that fool's gold when they're playing against a bunch of teams that are tanking. I think they're better. I think if Drew plays for the Portland Trail Blazers and you put him next to Scoot, it's a pretty interesting backcourt. They drafted Donovan Clingan last year, who had not a great rookie year, but was impactful defensively. They still have Jeremy Grant, who's making a lot of money, but potentially could be a trade candidate. Avdia, since he came over from the Wizards, played really well, might have been their best player last season. So I think there's some reason for at least slight optimism in Portland. I think of the teams that were really bad this year. I think Portland has a chance to be maybe a little better. So I'm not necessarily saying they're better because of the great offseason moves that they made. I just think they have some guys that potentially can continue to improve, and they have some other ways to be able to improve their team. I think Avdia is still getting better. Obviously, Scoot has an opportunity to improve. Shaden Sharp, same way. So I'll say this team's better, but not necessarily because of trading Anthony Simons for Drew Holiday or getting rid of DeAndre Ayton. I think it's more just the internal development of the guys already on the roster.
All right, Sacramento added Dennis Schroeder and Dario Saric. They lost Jake LaRavia and Jonas Valanciunas. I mean, I don't know what Sacramento is at this point. Dario Saric, I can't believe he's still in the league. Like, I don't know when I don't remember
when they signed him that he was going to be productive for them, and he obviously wasn't.
Yeah.
Sacramento just look. They have, I don't know. They're more to have DeRozan and Levine after we saw them in Chicago, and then to bring both of those guys in and have them in Sacramento. It felt like 2 years ago with the Light the Beam team that they had something together. When you think back that they had De'Aaron Fox and Halliburton in their backcourt, both of those guys, I know they both like to have the ball in their hands, but when you look at the talent that those two guys have and as good of basketball players as they are, it seems like somebody could have figured out how to make that work. Sacramento's just a mess. They've been a mess for a long time. They had the one Light the Beam season where it seemed like they were figuring things out. If Sabonis is your best player, as good as he is in the regular season, just because of the type of player he is and the fact that impose any kind of he doesn't pose any kind of threat in the lane as a defensive center. It makes it really tough to build a competent playoff defense around him. And yet you need him on the floor offensively. So he's a weird player to build around. I just have no idea what Sacramento's doing. And I don't know if they're going to be better or worse, but they're just bad. And they just don't have any direction as an organization. If you're a fan of Sacramento, you just got to be scratching your head going, I have
Yeah.
no idea what these guys are doing.
San Antonio added Luke Cornett. They've lost Sandro Mamukelashvili.
I like it. That was good. That was good. I have no idea if it's
Mamukelashvili.
right, but it sounded right.
And they also are going to lose Chris Paul in free agency. Listen, San Antonio is purely hinged on whether Victor Wembanyama is healthy and can play basketball. I have not heard any updates on Victor Wembanyama's blood clot situation. So
No, I have not either.
So that doesn't necessarily make me feel good that we haven't heard anything. But the bottom line is that's where it matters, and we'll have to see. Wait and see.
San Antonio's big decision this offseason was, were they going to use that number 2 pick in the draft to possibly go after a big fish? Who knows who that big fish may or may not have been. There was lots of Giannis talk before the offseason sort of started that maybe that if Giannis asked out, that San Antonio could be a potential landing spot, and San Antonio could use that number 2 pick to be able to incentivize Milwaukee. Instead, they just held on to the pick, drafted Dylan Harper. So I think finding out whether or not Dylan Harper is as good as everyone seems to think that he will be, and then combine him with De'Aaron Fox, do those two guys fit together? I think this season is going to be about figuring out what guys on the roster that they have now are going to be core pieces that they're going to want to build around going forward. Is Devin Vassell a guy that they can build on? Is Jeremy Sohan a guy that you can count on? Is Dylan Harper going to develop now that they have De'Aaron Fox? Is he a guy that Dylan Harper replaces, or is he a guy that can play next to Dylan Harper as they continue to develop and move forward as a team? So, yeah, obviously it all hinges on Wembanyama's health first and foremost. And then after that, I think the development of Dylan Harper as the number 2 pick will be key to whether or not this franchise has what it's going to take. And we forgot about Castle. Castle also is there. And so they have the nice makings of a nucleus around Wemby, but it clearly stems from his development and health.
All right, Toronto signed Jacob Poeltl to a big contract today. And they also added, oh no, I have to say his name again, Sandro Mamoushkalashvili.
That's work.
The Raptors, I mean, they haven't lost anyone. They're toiling in obscurity.
Do you want to root for a team that has that their best players are Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram?
No.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Okay. Utah added Yusuf Nurkic. Not Joseph. Yusuf Nurkic. They lost Johnny Juzang, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the Utah Jazz got worse.
They added Ace Bailey.
He showed up.
Ace is going to be getting shots off. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So they're worse. All right. And then the Wizards. We talked about this already. They added CJ McCollum, Dylan Jones, Kelly Olynyk. They lost to Sadiq, I think, Jordan Poole. It's a lateral move. They're going to be terrible as well.
They drafted Trey Johnson out of Texas, who was one of, if not the best shooter all around in terms of being able to catch and shoot off the dribble, shoot off the move. And most people seem to think that he's going to be a really good pro based on the analysis that I've read and looked at. I don't have much of an opinion on him myself, but that seems to be the consensus. All I'll say about Washington is that for the first time, it feels like they're not making silly moves. Jordan Poole had his moments in Washington as a goofball. He also had some decent moments as a player. I don't think losing him really hurts. Bringing in CJ McCollum, probably the same reason that the Pelicans brought him in originally. Pro's pro, a guy who can maybe show some of the younger guys on their roster what it means to be a professional. And Washington is still a long way away from being a competitive team. They have not really had any lottery luck that's enabled them to move up. And in fact, more often than not, the lottery gods have frowned at them and moved them down. And so this is a team that's kind of crying out for a star. And they just, to this point, have not had the luck in the lottery and the draft to be able to get that guy. But I do think that since this new front office has taken over, the moves that they have made have been solid. I still think they're going to be terrible this year. And I could very easily see them I think them and Brooklyn will be battling for the bottom of the Eastern Conference and probably the bottom of the entire league. But I do think that there is at least some hope of a competent front office making moves that are eventually going to lead to the Wizards becoming a competitive team. They got some young guys there, and Bub Carrington and Alex Sarr, that maybe not stars, but guys that could be a part of a good team at some point in the future. But Washington needs some lottery luck at some point to be able to kind of get out of the dregs that they're in.
We did it, Mike.
We did it. Nice work.
Real quick, I want to ask you your quick reaction, and I don't want us to get too ridiculous on this, but
okay,
the Cleveland getting a WNBA team. Are we going to have to start going to WNBA coverage in 4 years, Mike? Where we're talking about the Cleveland whatever. Do you have any interest? They have to be the Rockers.
I think they've got the Rockers again.
Come on, get out of here. If they didn't do the Rockers, that would be idiotic. They literally have a banner that's still hanging in the stadium that says Cleveland Rockers when they won the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
You cannot go with any other team name.
I agree with that. As far as my interest level will probably flow through my daughter Madeline's interest level because at this point she's at least mildly interested in the WNBA, so she will throw on a game once in a while to watch, and I'll sit down with her and watch that ostensibly more to sit with my daughter than to consume the WNBA. I do think that when you look at where the WNBA is with Caitlin Clark and with the controversy surrounding sort of her, I don't know if treatment is the right way to put it, but
Well, you
there's
saw
some things that,
she was nine. Did you see the voting stuff
yeah, I
today?
saw that she was voted the ninth best guard in the WNBA and whatever. Like again, I don't care what workplace you're in. There's always jealousy and people who are there's infighting and there's people that want to get something from someone else or whatever it might be. But it, I don't know. I don't. I haven't watched hardly any WNBA in my life. I don't really probably plan to start watching any WNBA in my life. And the fact that Cleveland has a team, I would guess that I'll probably watch the WNBA the same way I watch other sports that I don't really care about all that much. For example, the Guardians, who I care about in the playoffs. The last time I think I paid attention to the Guardians, you told me they had the best record in the league. Didn't they have the best record in the league at one point? Didn't you tell me that this year, early on in the season?
Yeah.
So they're not doing well anymore. Is that what you're telling me?
They're 40-40,
40-40. Is that okay? So that's
40
not
and
terrible.
43. Like
Oh, 40 and 43.
43.
All right. Well, that's still not
They've lost
terrible.
5 in a row.
Well, anyway, I guess my point to the WNBA is I don't, I'm not opposed to the WNBA, but I don't see myself as being a huge fan of it. I just don't have time. It's the same way bandwidth wise, there's only so much I can do. There's only so much time I have to be able to dedicate to anything. And most of my sports watching ends up going to the NBA or during football season ends up going to the NFL and maybe Ohio State college football. And beyond that, I have a hard time carving out time to be able to watch anything. So that's kind of where I sit with it.
Fair points. Fair points, Mike. All right. Anything else?
Nope. I think we adequately covered at least what is has been happening. It's now 12:24 a.m. on what is it
Here,
now?
let me just check Sham. Let me just check Sham. Let me just check
July 2nd.
Sham's.
See if there's any updates, if there's anything new before we go. Latest
Nothing
news.
new.
Nothing
Nothing
new.
new.
All right, good. So as of the time when we are signing off, which is 12:24 a.m. on Wednesday morning, July 2nd, we are as up to date as we possibly can be on NBA free agency. We will see what happens with the Cleveland Cavaliers, with LeBron James, with the rest of what is yet to come in the NBA silly season. But we appreciate you checking us out tonight. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening. And we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.